In 1956, MGM cut an 11-minute scene from Forbidden Planet that was never meant to reach theaters. A moment involving Anne Francis and her pet tiger, something about innocence, power, and an ancient myth that made censors panic. For decades, only a handful of people knew it existed. That scene explained why the tiger suddenly attacks Altaira after her first kiss. But the explanation was too controversial for 1950s audiences. What MGM buried revealed a darker secret about the film's true meaning. Back in 1952, two matte painters who had never written a screenplay in their lives walked into MGM with a story they called Fatal Planet. Irving Bloch and Alan Adler weren't taken seriously. Science fiction then was considered a dumping ground for low-budget throwaways, a place for leftover actors and reused monster suits. But their pitch had something strange and visual, something studios weren't used to: fear, awe, silence, and technology painted like images, not words. MGM tossed it aside, but something lingered. By 1954, the television boom and America's curiosity about space made the studio reevaluate that dusty pitch. Quietly, MGM transformed it into Forbidden Planet, one of the most expensive sci-fi experiments of its era, costing between $1.90 and $2 million. When most sci-fi films scraped by with $150,000, MGM wasn't trying to make another genre flick. They wanted to elevate it. They built sets from scratch, hired up-and-comers like Leslie Nielsen and Anne Francis, paired them with the gravitas of Walter Pidgeon, and suddenly the industry stopped and stared. Could sci-fi be prestige? Could it be art? Even MGM executives whispered about the cost, but the gamble worked. It made back its money and changed what science fiction meant to studios. Originally, the script was set in 1902, but its technology was too wild for such a near future, so they pushed the story to centuries forward, to the 23rd century on Altaira. Quietly, the plot borrowed from Shakespeare's The Tempest. Dr. Morbius became a futuristic Prospero. His daughter, Altaira, a space-age Miranda. Even the monsters behaved like spirits of vengeance, pulled from the subconscious. The fusion of mythology, psychology, and pulp sci-fi created something no one had seen before. MGM gave the directing job to Fred M. Wilcox, whose biggest credit was Lassie Come Home. People raised eyebrows, but the studio didn't want a visionary, they wanted discipline. Wilcox shot the film like Shakespeare in space. No jokes, no winks, no camp. His seriousness grounded the surreal story. Screenwriter Cyril Hume deepened the script, infusing it with Freudian psychology. The monsters became manifestations of repression and desire. The Krell became symbols of knowledge without restraint. It wasn't just a movie about aliens. It was a story about the human mind's darkest corners. Walter Pitt, 58 at the time, almost rejected the role of Morbius because sci-fi wasn't his world. But the Shakespearean parallels and massive budget changed his mind. Anne Francis, only 23, walked onto set wearing what would later be called the first miniskirt in cinema. Her costumes by Helen Rose were so shocking that Spain banned the film until 1967, and conservative theaters backed out. Barefoot and futuristic, she became an icon. Leslie Nielsen, long before comedy roles, played Commander Adams with the seriousness that would later inspire Captain Kirk. Warren Stevens played Doc Ost, whose discovery of monsters from the ID landed like a psychological thunderbolt for 1956 audiences. Most viewers didn't know what the ID was, but they felt it. Robbie the Robot became the film's breakout star. Marvin Miller voiced him, uncredited. Stuntman Frankie Darro suffered inside the sweltering electrified suit until he was replaced. Robbie wasn't just a prop, he became the first robot character built with ethics, following rules reminiscent of Asimov's laws. When the invisible monster attacked, Robbie froze because harming it would mean harming Morbius, his master. It was one of the earliest portrayals of robotics morality in film. The movie premiered first, not in Hollywood, but at a science fiction convention in Charlotte. MGM treated it like an epic, showing it in CinemaScope with stereophonic sound. It ran 6 months at Grauman's Chinese Theater. The score, credited as electronic tonalities by Louis and B.B. Barron, wasn't considered music by the Musicians Union. They built circuits that screamed, hummed, and died, recording the last gasp of each overloaded component. Every sound was handmade, unrepeatable. Their philosophy, shaped by cybernetics, treated circuits like living organisms. Reviews were mixed. Some critics thought it was a joke. Others saw brilliance. But time was on its side. It earned around $3 million worldwide, only a modest profit, but enough to prove sci-fi could be serious cinema. In 1957, it received an Oscar nomination for special effects, losing to The Ten Commandments, yet its influence endured. Then came the missing scene. Around the 11-minute mark, Dr. Ostro originally compared Altaira's relationship with her tiger to the ancient myth that only a virgin could tame a unicorn. MGM cut it entirely. The production code refused to allow such a metaphor, a woman's purity, giving her mystical power over animals. Without that scene, the tiger's sudden attack after Altaira's first kiss seemed random, but originally, it was symbolic. The moment innocence ends, the mythic protection dies. Her kiss with Commander Adams ended her power, and the tiger turned on her. The metaphor was too provocative for 1956. The scene survived only in the movie's novelization, published before release. Fans assumed the unicorn analogy was a literary flourish, not a deleted scene. MGM normally destroyed all work prints, but somehow Forbidden Planet survived. In 1977, the forgotten work print resurfaced with the unicorn dialogue intact. It was restored, included on a Criterion Laserdisc, then the 50th anniversary DVD and Blu-ray, finally revealing the intended symbolism. Another controversy emerged: the swimming scene. It looked like Frances was nude, but she wore a flesh-colored bodysuit. Cinematographer George Folsey used lighting and water reflections to hide seams. The illusion caused outrage, leading to letters, pulled showings, and MGM press statements denying nudity. For a 1972 re-release, MGM cut 6 minutes including the swimming scene to earn a G rating. Spain banned the film entirely for a decade due to her skirts. Helen Rose even designed a silver lame jumpsuit that covered Anne head to toe. But MGM's head said it was too sexy, purely because it was tight and sparkled. It was never used. Behind the metaphors were massive technical achievements. The alien landscape was a 350-foot cyclorama on stage 15, lit by hundreds of powerful bulbs that drained electricity from other stages. The spaceship interior included a 16-foot plexiglass globe that reflected everything, requiring hours to set up a single shot. The Krell lab had 50,000 feet of cable, 12,500 feet of neon tubing, and dozens of switches operated in real time. 4 of MGM's biggest sound stages ran simultaneously to create the world. The film cost $2 million, unheard of for C-Fee. Robbie alone cost $125,000 to 7% of the budget, equivalent to over $1 million today. Frankie Darro suffered inside the robot's suffocating body until he was replaced. But Robbie went on to become Hollywood's busiest robot, starring in The Invisible Boy, *The Twilight Zone, Lost in Space, Columbo, *The Addams Family, The Love Boat, *Mork and Mindy, and even Looney Tunes, Back in Action. The Baron's electronic score was built from dying circuits, each sound unique and painful to create. Annie Metter, Joshua Metter, borrowed from Disney, hand drew the ID monster, frame by frame, on vellum. Censors found it too terrifying and demanded edits. Because the monster wasn't a creature, it was a psychological force. The ID, rage, lust, fear, made real. Morbius didn't know he was creating it. The Krell machine interpreted his darkest subconscious thoughts and gave them form. The Krell themselves died in one night when their own subconscious monsters turned on them. And nearly the same fate came for Morbius. Forbidden Planet was more than a sci-fi film. It was a warning wrapped in spectacle, a myth disguised as futurism. A story about the mind's power to destroy itself when given the tools of gods. For decades, people watched without knowing what was missing. Only later did the buried scenes, the metaphors, and the technical secrets reveal how deep the film truly went. And when that mask finally slipped, what the world saw wasn't a clown at all, but a man who had spent a lifetime turning heartbreak into laughter. For decades, Red walked onto stages carrying a burden, never allowed anyone to see. Every joke, every goofy smile, was a shield, because behind the curtain, Red Skelton was still that little boy standing outside a circus tent calling out for a father who would never answer. He spent his whole life trying to make sure no one else ever felt that kind of emptiness. And maybe that's why he gave so much, why he stayed long after shows, signing autographs. Why he entertained troops for free, why he told his writers, if a man pays to laugh, give him more than his money's worth. But the laughter had a cost. Offstage, Red carried wounds. Almost no one knew about the loss of his young son Richard, the collapse of his marriage, the depression he masked with work. Friends said he would walk alone at night through empty studio lots, talking to the silhouettes on the soundstage. Waltzes, if they were the audience, he could not live without, because laughter wasn't just his gift, it was his oxygen. And then late in his life, Red finally confessed, something had kept buried for decades. I wasn't trying to entertain people, he said softly, I was trying to keep myself alive. For the first time, the world understood the truth behind his smile. This wasn't the story of a clown, was the story of a survivor, one who turned pain into joy and tragedy into hope. Man who believed that if he could make you laugh, even for a second, then maybe, just maybe, your heart would hurt a little less than his did. But the world didn't know that. Red's greatest performance came after the applause faded in his final years. When his body grew tired and the lights no longer followed him, Red discovered something he had spent a lifetime running from: silence. No laughter. No cameras. No audience waiting for a punchline. Just quiet. And for a man who lived through pain by drowning it in jokes, silence was terrifying. But slowly, he learned to sit with it. He began painting more hundreds of clowns, each one smiling, each one hiding something different behind the eyes. People thought they were whimsical, but Red once whispered to a friend, "Every one of those clowns is me." Late at night, he would place a finished painting on the easel, step back, and talk to ETAs if it were an old version of himself. Could finally comfort. And that's when he made his final confession, the one he had never said in public. "I spent my whole life trying to make people happy because I never knew how to make myself happy." For a moment, the world saw the real Red, not the characters, not the voices, not the slapstick magic. Just a man who carried generations of laughter on, a heart that had been breaking since childhood, and somehow, that only made the laughter more beautiful. In the last chapter of his life, Red Skelton began to understand something that had taken him nearly a century to learn. He was never truly alone, because every laugh he gave to the world, every soldier he comforted, every child he inspired, every family he brought together around a glowing TV set had quietly been giving something back to him. Love, the same love he had been searching for since the day he lost his father bear he ever got the chance to say a single word to him. And when Red walked on stage for the final time, he didn't perform, he didn't fall down, or crack jokes, or slip into a funny voice. He simply stood there, hands gently folded. As the audience rose to their feet, a standing ovation that lasted longer than any punchline he ever wrote, Red looked out at the crowd, faces he didn't know, people he had spent his entire life trying to make smile, and he said softly, "Thank you for letting me be part of your laughter." It was the only moment in his career when he allowed his tears to fall in front of the audience. And as he walked off stage, he turned back one last timid, blew a kiss into the spotlight. The same spotlight that had once been a hiding place was now a goodbye. When the world lost Red Skelton, it didn't just lose a comedian. It lost a man who believed that laughter was a gift you should give freely, because you never know what someone is carrying behind their smile. But his legacy didn't fade. Every time someone watches one of his skits, every time a child discovers a clown drawing he painted, every time a lonely person laughs at a joke he didn't expect to love, Red is still there. Behind the makeup, behind the mask, behind the smile, a man who turned his pain into a gift for the world and asked for nothing in return. And maybe that's why Red Skelton's story still matters today. Behind every joke he told, behind every character he created, behind every burst of laughter he sparked, was a simple belief. If you can make someone smile today, you've already made the world a better place. He never chased awards. He never bragged about ratings. He never cared about fame. He cared about people. The kids who watched him before school, the soldiers who needed a moment of home. The mothers who forgot their worries for half an hour, the fathers who sat with their families and laughed together, the lonely souls who found comfort in a clown who understood pain. Red gave them something priceless, not comedy, but connection. And though the world has changed, screens have changed, the way we laugh has changed. The need for someone like Red has never gone away. A man who reminded us that humor isn't an escape, it's a healing, a soft place to land when life becomes too heavy. So in the end, this isn't a story about a comedian. It's a story about a man who took the saddest parts of his life and turned them into light for millions. A man who provides that laughter is a language of the heart, and Red Skelton spoke it fluently. His final message still echoes. Good night, and may God bless. The curtain falls. The spotlight dims. But the laughter he gave us never truly ends. And long after Red Skelton left this world, something remarkable happened. People who had never seen his show live, people born decades after his final performance, were still laughing. They didn't know his struggles. They didn't know his heartbreak. They didn't know the nights he spent alone, painting smiling clowns to keep himself from crying. All they knew is how he made them feel. And that was Red's real legacy. Not the applause, not the fame, not the characters. That made him a household name. That was the reminder that somewhere, beneath every mask, beneath every laugh, beneath every human being, is a heart fighting battles we cannot see. Red understood this better than anyone, and that's why he gave everything he had to make the world a little softer, a little lighter, a little kinder. So when we look back on his life, we're not just remembering a comedian, we're remembering a man who carried the weight of his own so the rest of us could forget ours for a while. A man who believed with all the fragile courage inside him that laughter could save someone's day, maybe even save their life. And in the quiet moments, when a single laugh escapes a lonely room, Red Skelton still lives there. In that spark, in that warmth, in that brief, beautiful moment when the world feels just a little less heavy. Because legends don't stay in museums, they stay in hearts, and Red Skelton never really left. The screen slowly fades to black, but one final image remains, a single spotlight glowing in the center of an empty stage. Dust floats through the beam of light like tiny memories suspended in time. And then a silhouette steps into the glow. Not Reed, the clown. Not Reed, the performer, just Reed, the man. He turns his head slightly, as if listening to laughter that only he can hear, a laughter that once kept him alive. He smiles, not the big, Bright performers smile, but a small, gentle one. The smile of someone who finally found peace. His voice echoes softly, almost like a whisper from another lifetime. Remember me, not for the jokes I told, but for the joy you felt. The light grows brighter, warmer, as if the stage itself is saying goodbye. And then the camera slowly pulls back, wider and wider, until Red becomes smaller, a fragile figure, holding a lifetime of laughter in his hands. And just before the light fades, his final message appears on screen. Good night. And may God bless. The spotlight dims, the stage disappears, silence returns. But the laughter he left behind continues us, going softly, gently, eternally. Even as the stage emptied and the spotlight died, the story of Forbidden Planet continued to ripple through time. Decades later, scholars, fans, and filmmakers dissected every frame, every note of electronic tonalities, every flicker of Robbie's blinking lights. What once seemed like just a spectacle now revealed itself as a meditation on humanity, the power of the mind, the dangers of unchecked desire, the innocence that can tame or destroy. Each new generation discovered layers they hadn't noticed: the symbolism of Altaira and her tiger, the subtle Freudian echoes in Morbius's obsessions, the ethical dilemmas coded into Robbie. The film that had been too daring, too strange, and too ahead of its time had become a blueprint, influencing the way science fiction could tell stories about the human soul, not just outer space. In theaters, at home, and on screens, small and large, Forbidden Planet endured not as a simple movie, but as a living, breathing testament to imagination, courage, and the quiet audacity of visionaries who dared to dream bigger than their world would allow. And in that enduring legacy, the echoes of those missing scenes, the hidden metaphors, and the technological marvels continued to whisper their secrets, reminding everyone that some stories are never fully told, only discovered again and again.